Okay, so welcome to our second Young Professional Seminar in 2021. We are delighted to have so many of you participating today. And I would like to invite all of you to apply for our leadership program, the Young Professional Advisors. If you are interested, please get in touch with me. You will find my email in the chat. At the end of today's discussion, we will open the floor for questions from the audience. But until then, please hold tight. Today's topic is cryptocurrencies and the digital euro. And to discuss with me is our young professional advisor, Felix Klein. Can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Oh, thanks a lot, Daria. And thanks a lot for everyone for joining. I'm overwhelmed that so many people signed up. I'm a master's student at the London School of Economics, as well as the Humboldt University of Berlin, studying business administration, accounting, finance, and strategy. And I'm working as a student consultant for an advisory that is helping German companies to enter China. And in my free time, I'm a young professional advisor. And together with Nadim, who's a good friend of mine, I worked on a publication covering cryptocurrencies and digital currencies. And I do not want to talk too much, so I will hand over for the next person, and happy to talk to you soon.
Please, Nadim, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming today. So my name is Nadim. I'm from Berlin, Germany, and I recently graduated in e-governance and information systems. That was an Erasmus Mundus Master of Science. So I had the pleasure to study at 3 different countries in Belgium, Germany, and Estonia, and completed that right before the pandemic started. So I was lucky. Professionally, I've been working in different EU institutions during my studies and also afterwards. And also I've been actively involved into the crypto space for almost 5 years by now. And just as Felix mentioned, we have been working on a publication together on central bank digital currencies and also the context provided by digital currencies in the crypto space. And we contrasted the Chinese and the European approach towards a digital central bank currency. So I assume that many of the points that we discussed in the paper will also be discussed today during the panel, and I'm looking forward to speak about it.
Thank you very much, Nadim. Max, please, you're up next. Can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, hey everybody. Hey panelists, and hello to the participants today. So yeah, where to begin? I guess I first found out about Bitcoin in 2013. Yeah, disclaimer, I'm the Bitcoin guy. At least, that's how I'll introduce myself. So I did a little bit of mining in 2013, stepped away from the space for 3 years because the exchanges in the markets were just not where they needed to be. And then in 2016, I would say I kind of started diving in deeply and became the Bitcoin believer that I am today. Professionally, I'm currently working for Avaloq doing core banking software. I have a technical background. I have a degree in engineering from the University of Edinburgh here. But I'll soon start working with Finoa in Berlin on institutional grade crypto custody, which is super exciting. And yeah, my personal brand, I guess, is Whole Grain Crypto, which you can see behind me, which is an education site where I've got an online course that I built in 2019, teaching people how to, dollar cost average into Bitcoin and why you might be investing in Bitcoin from a fundamental point of view. Yeah, so I'm super excited for today's conversation. You guys obviously have really cool, diverse backgrounds. So yeah.
Thank you, Max. Aaron Wagner, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Thanks, Daria. Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron Wagner. I'm one of the co-founders of the MXC Foundation based here in Berlin. And the MXC Foundation, we focus on a lot of things, mainly focus around data, hardware, connectivity, or what you'll probably know as IoT, the Internet of Things. And what we're really focusing on at the MXC Foundation is connectivity. So as I said, not just connectivity of also devices, but also people and connecting data and connecting people to that data. So we're really focused on implementation with our token, and we're focused on specifically smart cities as well. So getting more people involved. We've got a strong focus in the Asian market, especially in China and also Korea. And we're also starting to roll it now into Europe and also the US as well. So it's an exciting time for everyone involved in cryptocurrencies and also blockchain. And I'm happy to be here. So looking forward to the talk today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Aaron. Erkan, please, could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Thank you, Daria. Hi, everybody. My name is Erkan Öz. I'm a journalist and economist. I worked for local and international news outlets, including IHA, DHA, and Dow Jones Newswires, the Wall Street Journal, and Al Jazeera. In 2013, I wrote a book on impact of technology over world economy, and I said in that book, I can show it like this. From 2020, the world will enter a big economic crisis, and while the central banks keep printing new currency, some limited supply monetary assets like gold, silver, and Bitcoin will attract significant attraction. And there was a section in the book about Bitcoin in 2013. I guess I was the one of the first people mentioning about Bitcoin in Turkey. So I'm quite famous in Turkey about Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies. So it's very nice to attend this meeting. I hope it will be very efficient.
Thank you very much, Erkan. And certainly your fame even is known here in Berlin. You've been suggested to us
Really?
as of course, that's why you're
you.
here with us on the panel. Thank you. So I want to jump right into it. Cryptocurrencies are revolutionizing traditional finance, as we just also heard from Erkan. Bitcoin's reputation as a digital gold has grown this year, particularly, and with a number of high-profile investors naming it as an emerging inflation hedge. So large payment providers such as PayPal and Square are enabling cryptocurrency payments. And in the UK, Starbucks or upmarket grocers like Whole Foods now accept Bitcoin as a payment. So even institutional investors are waking up to it, and Fidelity Investments, for example, is launching a Bitcoin fund, and Goldman Sachs has restarted its cryptocurrency trading desk. Max, I want to start with you first. Are we seeing a maturation process of the cryptocurrency market, and why are people buying Bitcoin right now? How has the narrative changed behind Bitcoin since it began?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack here. The market looks so much better and healthier and more robust than it did in 2017. I think in 2017, we all kind of, those of us that really believed in Bitcoin kind of understood where we were going or where we could be going. And today, like it's we're arriving. So I knew this question was coming, so I just put together some quick points for the listeners that might not be aware of everything going on. So Bitcoin is now a $1 trillion market by market capitalization. Bitcoin is 60% of the overall crypto market. The second biggest crypto is Ethereum, which is 11% of the market. We're seeing markets get a lot more efficient, meaning not only are the exchanges able to kind of handle larger volumes of trading, but we also have market makers, people doing arbitrage, generally providing a lot more liquidity to the space. You can trade a lot bigger tickets than you used to be able to. So for example, like when Michael Saylor bought his initial $250 million chunk of Bitcoin, he did it over 5 days with Coinbase Prime, which is Coinbase's prime brokerage offering. And that news was incredible because it was not only one of the first major companies to put their treasury into Bitcoin, meaning they don't want to hold cash, they'd rather hold something like Bitcoin, but also it showed that, the liquidity is there. You can get $250 million of Bitcoin in 5 days. And like none of us knew it was happening until the announcement, right? It wasn't like the price was like shooting up, like this was kind of very stealthily day by day, second by second. So yeah, the liquidity is there. The markets are thriving. We have a thriving derivatives market, which is now overtaking the spot market by volume. We've got Bitcoin and Ethereum futures trading on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. What else? We've got the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, kind of giving an avenue for accredited investors to get like regulated shares of Bitcoin through their Bitcoin Trust that has $34 billion under management right now. What else do we have? Of course, Tesla has also converted some of their treasury into Bitcoin. Like Daria mentioned, we've got PayPal, Square's Cash App, Revolut, Robinhood, all making possible the buying and selling of Bitcoin. So yeah, I mean, the market is just exploding. We're seeing interest from kind of more reputable participants, you know, whether it be hedge funds, venture funds, companies like Tesla and MicroStrategy. So that's really exciting. As far as the second part of the question, the narrative of Bitcoin has changed kind of, it's kind of ebbed and flowed and evolved as we go forward, which is fine. At the moment, I would definitely say the narrative is that it's a hedge against inflation and it's a store of value. This, of course, like in 2017, none of us knew that coronavirus would happen, right? And we didn't know that the government would have to engineer a way for us all to like sit at home and not be working and still, you know, have money to pay for things. So like back then we were saying like, oh, if you put 1% of your net worth in Bitcoin, you'll have that schmuck insurance. You'll have an asset that's kind of fundamentally, you know, different than the rest of the financial system. But now inflation is kind of on everyone's lips on the back of coronavirus. So that's definitely the reason that people are saying that they're buying Bitcoin. Whether or not it's still ultimately a trade for people like Tesla and MicroStrategy, you know, I mean, in my opinion, you know, they're going to be sellers, like they have obligations to their shareholders. So I don't like Michael Saylor says that he's happy to hold Bitcoin forever and that he's a real holder. But you know, we'll see kind of the degree to which the narrative and the conviction of these people holds throughout kind of future market volatility.
Mm-hmm. I see. And Nadim, did you wanted to say something to that?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with what Max just said, and I would like to add also onto that. So just in terms of context, I see two major trends at the moment emerging from the cryptocurrency and digital asset space. So first of all is what Max just mentioned, this narrative of Bitcoin as a store of value, as a digitally scarce asset, as a decentralized asset that cannot be inflated. And that's a counter proposal to inflationary fiat currencies, especially in an expansive monetary environment as we see it at the moment globally. So in 2017, there was always this idea of institutional money joining the crypto space, but it did not really happen. And now with publicly traded companies and large financial institutions entering the space, we finally see this happening. So we see publicly traded companies allocate significant shares of their cash positions into Bitcoin as a reserve asset and a potential store of value to hedge against this inflationary environment. And that's just another adoption step from the retail investment perspective, also from now to corporate investors. And potentially, maybe within the next 5 years, we could see another stage of adoption where even central banks would start to allocate parts of their funds into Bitcoin as a store of value and reserve asset. So that's one of the biggest contexts. And the second one is, of course, Ethereum as the second largest cryptocurrency, which is much more flexibly programmable and allows decentralized financial applications to be developed on top of it. And now we see a lot of investors using financial products, lending out their cryptocurrency to earn interest and to also be part of those financial applications to add liquidity to them and also to receive interest on top of that. So that is basically a development that replaces banks as intermediaries, because those are peer-to-peer systems. And that's another facet to these developments.
And did we see like a real life example of people kind of investing or hedging into cryptocurrency as they see their own currency deflate?
Is that to me?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I think we see it all around the world, especially in countries that are more subject to inflation, where the state-issued currencies are not as strong as, for example, the dollar as the world reserve currency, and also the euro. So I think in Latin America, you would see plenty of such examples, but also at the moment in Turkey. So I think Erkan would be a good person to answer this.
Exactly. And Erkan, you're the next. I wanted to turn to you now here. Please, can you talk a bit about the currency situation in Turkey? Have you seen a rise in cryptocurrency popularity in Turkey since the devaluation of the Turkish lira? And are people hedging their money in cryptocurrency?
Of course, we saw a lot of headlines in newspapers and other news outlets telling that people in Turkey are rushing for Bitcoin. The Google search for Bitcoin in Turkey doubled, etc. But when we actually look at the data, we don't see this picture. At least the picture tells us that you shouldn't exaggerate the situation, because when we look at Google search in Google Trends for Bitcoin in Turkey, the peak was 100 points in February, not today, not after the devaluation, or not after the bombshell news hit the headlines that the central bank governor was fired. Today, it's just 65 points, but in February, it was 100 points. And in January, it was something like 80 points or something like that. So when we look at the trading volumes of the largest two exchanges in Turkey, cryptocurrency exchanges, yes, their trading volume doubled in those days. On 20 and 21st March. But it was so temporary, it just lasted for a day. And again, those trading volumes were not peak volumes for Turkish exchanges. One of the exchanges is BTC Türk, and the other one is Paribu. Paribu hit $1.4 billion in the middle of March, but today it's just $500 million. And BTC Türk hit $1.2 billion in February, I guess, and it's today just $400 million. But on the other hand, there is a significant and rapidly growing interest for Bitcoin in Turkey. That's undeniable. If you look at the estimates of CEOs of these exchanges, they were saying that the daily Turkish cryptocurrency trading volume was something like 500 or $700 million at the start of 2020, last year. But today, when we calculate all the exchanges in Turkey, just in Turkey, not the transactions conducted in the other exchanges, in global exchanges, it's now around $6.9 billion, almost tenfold increase. And number of investors also at least doubled or maybe tripled. We can say that as the most positive estimate, we have got 3 million cryptocurrency investors in Turkey now, which makes some 3.6% of the population. It's growing, it's clear, but I guess it's not directly linked with the currency situation. Of course, it has got an impact, but when Naci Ağbal, the recent central bank governor, came to the post in the beginning of November, the Turkish lira appreciated significantly against the dollar. But that was the period when also Bitcoin doubled or tripled its price. So the interest for Bitcoin was growing very significantly. For example, in the beginning of the 2021, the trading volumes of these two top Turkish exchanges was something like $100 million and $200 million. And today they are fluctuating around $400 and $500 million. So there's a significant increase for Bitcoin interest, while the Turkish lira was getting stronger and stronger day by day against US dollar.
So we don't really see a correlation between.
So we cannot tell that there's a correlation. But Turkish people are very interested in Bitcoin because of its rapidly increasing price and because of the opportunities it brings, of course. And of course, not only with Bitcoin, for other altcoins as well, because many people want to get rich quick in Turkey. So, and they don't care about risks too much.
So it's more speculation.
Yeah, but of course, the cryptocurrency community, which is around 300,000 and 500,000 people, they are so talented and experienced now, and they know what they are doing, and they are clearly considering Bitcoin as a reserve asset, not a trading asset so much, and they are keeping their reserves in Bitcoin, especially in this year, in 2020 and 2021. And I guess they will have very nice performance at the end of this bull season, rising season. And but the other guys who are only coming for speculation and getting rich quickly, they may suffer a lot at the end of this season.
Thank you very much, Erkan, for that overview of what's happening in Turkey right now. So yes, I guess we can say there is a Bitcoin revolution, and not only here, it's probably worldwide. And but there's also a digital asset revolution going on, I guess. So let's talk about blockchain, the technology behind digital assets. And Aaron, I'm thinking, I want to hear from you now. Blockchain is said to be the disruptor of the disruptors. And I want to know, what is your outlook on the disruptive potential of blockchain? And why do you see it as a disruptor? And do you see the potential of blockchain transforming our economy here in Europe?
Yes. Next question. No, absolutely. Look, I think that's the issue here, and as well, it's already disrupting a lot of different areas, especially our financial areas. It's already begun. It can't be stopped, and I think that's the exciting aspect as well. We have seen a number of narratives over the years, and I've been involved in crypto and blockchain for quite some time now. We've seen a number of narratives from the top in order to dispel, let's say, the credibility of cryptocurrencies and or blockchain as a technology. And as a result of that, I think people are still getting involved. And so it's super exciting for the industry because people want to know how it works for them, whether it's the blockchain or whether it's in regards to cryptocurrency. So we are seeing this disruption. It can't be stopped. We've already kind of opened this, the Pandora's box to a large extent, and that's super exciting. And I know we're focusing a lot today on Bitcoin already, but there are literally thousands of tokens out there with a lot of different functionalities that can be used for a lot of different people. And that also goes, for example, of how people can use the blockchain as well. So we're talking in a wide variety of industries, from banking. You know, we see it now, we sell at MXC, we sell a miner, for example, and we are selling that using, of course, bank transfers from people everywhere from the US, Europe, Australia, Asia, wherever it may be. But of course, when you do a bank transfer, that takes quite some time. And that's a big issue for a lot of people. Plus, you generally have to pay a lot of fees in regards to transferring from one currency to another. And crypto removes a lot of that. So we see a lot of changes in, for example, the banking industry, especially in regards to blockchain as well, where there's a lot more security around it. You can see that it's been sent. Usually it passes within a matter of, let's say, minutes in good times. And it's a secure and relatively cheap way of sending payments internationally and making sure they arrive as well. So that's really important, I think, for a lot of people, and it's affecting the banking industry. We just saw Tesla recently say they'll accept Bitcoin as well as a payment method. We've also got import-export industries in regards to blockchain, and goods globally, I think, will be changing a lot in future, where you'll see along the way of things being delivered, who's delivering it, who's touching it along the way, where did things go missing, et cetera, and we can really then find out along that area what happened to certain goods, where did they go missing, where did it fall down potentially, and help businesses grow as well, I think. And that also goes for the IoT industry. We've been talking about data for a long time, so I think a lot of telecommunications companies in particular, we will see maybe take more of a back seat as people start getting more involved in their own smart homes, their own data, and really then being able to utilize that to improve their lives. So I think there's a whole wide variety of industries that we will see change. And I said that's just a few of them. The sharing economies as well. So we look at the Ubers and the Airbnbs out there, these kind of big names that we're all championing right now to a large extent, although Corona's kind of taken a bit of a hit for both of them in particular. But what we're noticing as well is with blockchain, it allows people, and also Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, USDT, for example, a stable coin, USDC, if you will, et cetera, they enable people to do transactions between each other. And I think we'll see these bigger companies, such as the disruptors back in the days, the Ubers, for example, the Airbnbs, those disruptors, where we needed this kind of middle person to stand there and make sure the transaction was effective, and therefore those two parties agreed on that. We can have those smart contracts between two individuals, which will then potentially revolutionize other industries as opposed to just the banking industry that we're focusing on pretty much now.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And Felix, did you wanted to say something to that as well?
Aaron, you made great points, and I can only add one idea that we are going to talk about later. If you keep out the middle person, if you keep out the banks or any other institutions, and you have peer-to-peer networks, also central banks and governmental institutions are concerned because they can't watch anymore, or they can't control anymore if it is worldwide organized and decentralized. So I would like to talk about that later. Thanks.
Okay. Sure. So we heard a lot of positive things about Bitcoin and blockchain, but surely there's also a dark side to it, and we hear it all the time in the news as a narrative. There are several narratives of Bitcoin's role in illicit financing, and also regulators kind of are concerned and stated that traders are supposed to be ready to lose all their money when they invest in crypto assets, and due to the price volatility. And the same warning basically was issued by authorities in New Zealand, Poland, and Austria. So let's talk regulation. How can a regulation of this decentralized peer-to-peer network of be realized to avoid volatility, to avoid criminal money laundering and darknet activities? Max, what's your take here?
Yeah, I mean, this is, this is a question that's been asked throughout Bitcoin's entire history. And I mean, the simple answer is you regulate the on and the off ramps. So when you're taking the fiat money and buying Bitcoin, or when you're selling Bitcoin and taking fiat money, the exchanges that are then facilitating those transactions, and then, having some relationship with the bank to send those fiat payments. That's where you focus the regulation, and we've seen exchanges come a long way. Derivatives have been kind of more recently still kind of a shady, the shadier side to the markets. We've seen BitMEX's founders kind of, in hot water with the U.S. authorities recently, but even the derivatives market is getting cleaned up a lot compared to, a few years ago when it was starting out. In terms of, illicit markets and money laundering and avoiding sanctions and all of that, I mean, it's important to remember that the Bitcoin blockchain is a public ledger, so all of those transactions are going to be there for all time. The addresses are anonymous, so my address isn't my name; it's just like a string of numbers and letters, and I can make a new address at any time. But you really have to be, not very intelligent or, very careless to be using the Bitcoin network to do especially high value kind of illicit transactions. And I think the way that we regulate this is just the same way that we regulate cash. Like if I want to buy a house for $500,000 and I show up with briefcases and suitcases full of cash, the counterparty to that transaction should be asking some questions about where the money came from. And I think, you know, we can do the same thing with Bitcoin. And with Bitcoin, it's actually easier because we can see on the ledger where the money came from. So, you know, it's something that we have to think about. And it's something that we have to take seriously. I think, you know, we can, the space can only thrive if we get regulation, if we get it right. But I think there's, you know, it's not an impossible challenge by any means, and it's just a matter of working with regulators to kind of design a system that, you know, keeps the positives of Bitcoin as a settlement layer, and also avoids kind of the negative things that we can all agree on, like, you know, not financing terrorism and things like that.
Mm. And
I
Nadim?
guess, can I have a word on this?
Yes, sure.
Sorry, Nadim. I guess education will also have a big role in this space, because most of the world today, even people living in the so-called developed countries, are totally illiterate about finance and the, you know, possible Ponzi schemes that could be conducted on financial spaces. So there should be classes in schools for educating people on how the money is created, what is money, how the financial system works. And after that, people will be more responsible about their financial actions, I guess. Because you cannot put regulators or police every corner. It's impossible. And with this technology, it's almost impossible to send the police everywhere and get a regulation everywhere.
Yeah.
So I guess education can have a big role here.
Absolutely. And Nadim, you wanted to say, and then after Aaron.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with Erkan. I also think that education is a very important point, but not only on the retail side, also on the regulator side, I think. So whenever we listen to central bankers and regulators speak about the cryptocurrency space, if they even speak about it at all, it's usually that they point out the illicit activity and money laundering activity happening on these networks, mainly Bitcoin. But in fact, we have studies from this year basically claiming that the share of illicit activity and criminal activity happening on the Bitcoin network fell to 0.34% last year. So this argument is a bit like talking about money laundering happening with cash. Obviously, the US dollar as the world reserve currency is, in fact, the medium of exchange used the most for criminal activity, just by default. And it's just that cryptocurrency, especially Bitcoin as a decentralized cryptocurrency, is open and free to be used by anybody. And of course, also a small percentage of that usage may fall into the category of illicit activity. But I think that this is not the main driver and the main motivation between any sorts of regulatory initiatives. I think it is rather this systemic competition that is placed by Bitcoin towards the monetary system at the moment that would drive sorts of regulative initiatives. So if we acknowledge that decentralized networks, just like Ethereum and also Bitcoin, cannot be regulated as such, like fundamentally on the infrastructure layer, since they're not controllable, like unstoppable, then we can look at what would be possible in terms of regulatory initiatives. And that would be, of course, as Max pointed out, on and off ramps. So looking at the crypto exchanges that have registries of users, and then you could connect those crypto addresses with their identities. You could start taxation, coordinated taxation on crypto assets. And we also see definitely that authorities are building up capabilities to, in the direction of digital assets, to identify tax evasion, to understand schemes and identify all sorts of illicit activity with regard to that. And maybe one last point when it comes to regulation in terms of cryptocurrency, I think mainly the stable coins are a current target of regulators. So the EU has made clear that it will not accept any stable coins within the Eurozone aside of the euro. And yeah, especially US dollar Tether as the biggest stablecoin at the moment is also targeted by authorities in the United States. And obviously stablecoins pegged to the dollar or the euro are also the biggest competitor towards a central bank digital euro. And in that case, I would expect those to be targeted first in terms of regulation.
Okay. Aaron, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, just a few things. I mean, it's quite interesting trying to regulate. I'm not sure who the benefit is for. Is it for the regulators or is it for the users? Because I don't see any benefit for the users of cryptocurrencies to be regulated, except for regulators to profit from that as well. So I don't think it's a good idea to regulate personally, because I don't see any need for it. It's a decentralized system that we're running. So therefore, I think regulation, especially from governments who potentially are challenged with a number of things. We see that right now. I don't think they have the skills or the tools to be able to regulate such an industry. I think it's quite dangerous to even think they can. And also, of course, this narrative that we keep hearing as well. And I agree, like, you know, the fact that people keep saying, okay, well, using Bitcoin is good for illegal means and whatnot. And we realize that with fiat and cash as a whole, you know, I mean, no one goes around and says, well, Pablo Escobar couldn't have built his world domination just sitting on Bitcoin. There was no Bitcoin in the 80s and he used cash for that. So in that sense, we need to focus on what's really important. No one spoke of in the 80s, okay, let's get rid of cash because it's used for legal means. So I think at the end of the day, what we need to focus on is what's happening. And the fact is that I think decentralization is playing a role in this, where a lot of governments potentially aren't happy with the fact that it's becoming decentralized, that maybe they have less of a role to play in people's day-to-day lives. And that's a key aspect where I think you hear these narratives of, as I said, whether it's in regards to illegal means, terrorism, drugs, whatever it may be, that's a narrative being pushed by a lot of the, I would say, governments in order to ensure regulation, where regulation potentially isn't needed. And, you know, I think about these times where, especially when I was a kid, and, you know, you'd play games, you play football, for example. And some of the best and most fun times I'd be playing is when I'd get some friends together and we'd play on the field. And those were some of the greatest times. Then you go and play on a Sunday, you go and play with the referee, etc. And it was nowhere near as fun as the times you play with your friends. And the reason why that is it was over-regulated to a large extent. There were some specific things that you potentially didn't agree with. However, when you're with your friends, everyone understands these unspoken rules. There are these rules on specific chains of things you can do with cryptocurrencies, things you can't do with them, and everyone understands those rules. In regards to legal activities, that's something completely different where, as I said, you can use fiat, you can use whatever you wish for it. But in regards to the general rules of how people operate within these chains and within these cryptocurrencies, that's already outlined by how the chain works. So in that sense, I don't even see how the governments can regulate in a decentralized world without potentially, let's say, forcing too much regulation that could potentially stifle growth within the industry.
Fascinating. So we talked a lot about cryptocurrency. Let's talk about the digital currency. And for those who don't know, maybe Felix, could you explain just quickly or briefly what is the main difference between the two?
Yes, of course. A digital currency is issued by a central bank. It is called as CBDC, and it is therefore it is different because cryptocurrency is decentralized, organized, and digital currency is centralized, organized by a central bank that is also giving it one-time trust, but having the chance to regulate. As Aaron said, there are regulations and they might stop the game or might stop the fun of the game. Also, central banks have interest of governing people and governing monetary politics, and that might take out some fun. But on the other hand, give some institution you can talk to, some institution where you can have influence with what kind of regulations you would like to have and what kind of
and stay with banks.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to stay with you here, Felix, because you're also here because you're an expert on China. So let us turn our attention for now to China, where cryptocurrencies are essentially banned. So no cryptocurrency, but what is happening in China is that they have recently, or not so recently, actually for longer now, introduced already the digital currency scheme. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. China is a very interesting case because it's a huge economy and it is introducing a digital currency since 2014. And last year there was a huge approach entering major cities such as Shenzhen or Beijing, with having about 140 million customers using the state-owned or state-organized digital currency. But I would like to go a step back and to have a broader overview of that, because there are two reasons why China is doing that. At first, there's a domestic demand, because the Chinese population is about 1.4 billion people, and they are very likely to use internet or e-commerce. So we have about 920 million people who would like to use e-commerce for the day-to-day business. People who have been traveling to China know that there's WeChat, the online payment system that you can pay per app, or Alipay. These services are also coming to Europe. And on the other hand, with these people who would like to use digital ways, the Chinese government faced a situation that people were using Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies for capital flight. And then it was thinking about, okay, but we have also something else in mind. And that is the other point, the aspiration of the Chinese government to become the world leading country, as well as the world leading economy and the very strong political power. And if you have to think about that, you also have to find a way to attack the US dollar with its dominating role in the world. So the Chinese government was doing the first step in 2013 by banning cryptocurrencies, for stopping capital flight, and also the peer-to-peer system where Chinese people were lending money to each other without the government knowing what's going on. And then in 2014, the Chinese government said, okay, we would like to introduce our own digital currency for the people who would like to use these new modern ways to pay. And that is very important, as it is a huge economics of scale because of the population and also the economic power that is coming. But it is also becoming a world issue or a world challenge, as the Chinese government has two huge reforms we should also take care of. That is the Made in China 2025 reform, where the Chinese government is aiming to have the world leading position in technology, robotics, or artificial intelligence. And another reform or another program, that is the One Belt, One Road initiative, where the Chinese government is investing huge sums of money into developing countries and having the situation that for infrastructure projects, companies are lenders. And the Kiel Institute of World Economics was estimating that about $5 trillion of loans are given out to companies, and they are also using digital channels to give out loans, because the Chinese government is very smart. Those loans are given to other governments or other state-owned enterprises, but on the other hand, these loans are used to fund projects where Chinese companies are working. And to speed up this circle, they use digital currency or their own digital yuan they're introducing.
So they're lending basically with their digital currency already in their huge infrastructure projects. Is
yes.
that? Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
But only in parts, as it is developed in China at first and then going abroad step by step. We also use the SWIFT system for Western countries, and the Chinese government introduced the Chinese international payment system that is also creating a channel to use payments and also opening the digital yuan to be distributed soon.
And how do you see that challenging the Eurozone?
The European Union is in a difficult position because it is between the US and also between China, where the United States government is hesitating to develop its own digital currency, and the Chinese government is advanced, offering an opportunity for companies or for people in middle-sized countries or in developing countries using the Chinese currency to the Chinese terms, and the Chinese government can track everything. While in the European Union, people are also likely to use cryptocurrencies or digital payment methods. Like we can see it here that we talk with each other about these topics and many people signed up for that. And we also need a European alternative, and the European Central Bank is working on that.
Okay, and we will get to that just a step later. Erkan, I want to hear from you again about Turkey, because there are plans of the Turkish Central Bank to introduce a digital currency. I've read in the news that the pilot is about to be launched in May or so, but now you touched upon this before. The central banker has been replaced. So what does that mean for the plans to introduce a digital currency in Turkey?
I don't think that it will have a big impact on the digital currency plans, because I don't think that the department studying on this issue will be replaced or abolished or something like that, because the initiative is coming from the presidency. President Erdogan disclosed on March 12th, I guess, that the infrastructure, economic, legal and technological infrastructure for digital currency will be ready this year. And 2 days ago, there was again official statement telling us that these studies, these infrastructure studies, will be concluded by the end of this year, 2021.
So, but they're still in the research phase, or is there already like a pilot?
We don't know. They don't disclose those details. We don't have an official roadmap for this digital currency. We only know that the studies will be finalized by the end of this year. Of course, this date could be changed anytime during this year as well. But I think Turkey will move in a different path when compared to China, because Chinese way of approaching to the blockchain and digital currency is a kind of creating a dystopian future worse than George Orwell's 1984. They want to track every transaction. Most probably they will ban all traditional cash transactions in the future. And the worst thing, I guess, they will give credit to people according to their social credit points, which means you will not be getting credits for your economic success, but you will be getting paid, or you will be provided with cheap credit because you are loyal to the government, or loyal to the government, rhetoric. So that's very bad. And I guess Turkey will provide the opportunity for its citizens to also continue conducting operations with independent cryptocurrencies along with the digital lira, because there's a television in Turkey called A News, A Haber, which is very close to the government, and sometimes too close to the government. We make fun of it.
And do you think that the digital currency in Turkey will be more concerned about privacy than, or
no? I'm not talking about that. Digital currency is a central bank currency, and it will be most probably a unlimited supply currency, and it will be controlled centrally by the government or the central bank. There's no problem with that. But Turkey is moving to a path where the citizens could both use the digital lira and independent cryptocurrencies and the traditional cash. Because
and I think Europe is basically having the same sort of plan.
Yeah, that should be the future, because if we force people to use only the central bank digital currency, that will be an awful scenario.
Absolutely. And I think Nadine wanted to talk about that, because sure. We just wanted to discuss the advantages of the digital euro and what we should actually do differently here in Europe. So Nadim, what sort of suggestions do you have for the European Central Bank to
Yes, so that's where it gets exciting, but let me start with the status quo first. So the EU, the European Central Bank, is similarly hesitant compared to China, for example, who is much more advanced. Probably it's also a strategic and geopolitical driver that, of course, the EU might not be as interested in any significant changes of the current monetary system. That's maybe also why we don't see as much initiative so far. So just to clarify where we are at the moment, the ECB has not yet made any committed decision to actually issue a central bank digital currency. We expect a public commitment to start a project in that direction within the next months, certainly within this year. And then if they would decide to actually launch the project, the development of it would probably take many years to actually be completed. So just to make clear, at the moment, there is not any decision taken, and there's also not any design decisions taken yet that I could talk about that are fixed. I can only speculate at this point. But in the terms of research, there's a lot of interesting aspects to central bank digital currency that could be possible theoretically. So first and foremost, it's about the programmability of money. That's something that we definitely can learn from the crypto space, especially when it comes to Ethereum. So there could be programmed features and monetary tools that can be dynamically adjusted. So to make it a bit more concrete, when it comes to interest rates, those could be imposed on particular sectors of the industry. Theoretically, the central bank would also be able to analyze much better capital flows within the domestic economy and could stimulate particular aspects. At the moment, the ECB has this issue, or central banks around the world have this issue, that they're trying to stimulate the economy, but they don't really reach the goal of money actually entering the real economy. Instead, a lot of capital is stuck in the equity markets at the moment, which does not stimulate the inflation as desired by the central bank. And with a central bank digital currency that could be issued directly to the customers and to the economy, it would be possible to incentivize desired behavior. You could incentivize spendings on certain goods. You could tighten on certain aspects of the industry and stimulate on others. But of course, there's also a lot of security and privacy concerns. And it's like this contrast between data analysis and being able to make iterative adjustments in an agile way, but also respect the privacy of businesses and users. And this could also be extended from the monetary level to a fiscal policy level. So also social security payments could be made within the central bank digital currency and could be automated. Same for taxation, same for law enforcement. And we see this is a broad palette of various policy tools. And obviously that raises a lot of questions. For example, there would be a lot of concentration of power on central banks. There are blurred boundaries between fiscal and monetary policy, like national states and central banks. And also, we don't want the free market economy to be too manipulated by central banks, and of course, the privacy concerns. But just to make clear, there's a lot of aspects that could be implemented in such a central bank digital currencies, and many of these concepts we see already in the crypto space. Also, when it comes to European institutions and their decision processes, for example, the ECB has national states also having an influence on the monetary policy of the central bank. And there, for example, one could also imagine something like decentralized governance models and structures being applied within such a central bank digital currency. But of course, this is still far away from reality. And at the moment, I think the central banks are focusing more on a payment layer when it comes to these things.
And how could the central bank mitigate those digital currency policy concerns? How can we avoid a scenario where the digital currency suddenly replaces conventional deposits with commercial banks, which I think is one of the major roadblocks and which is holding the central bank back in introducing a digital currency in order to avoid financial chaos breaking out?
Is it also for me?
Yes, or for whoever wants to take the question. I think Aaron also wanted to.
Sure. I'd quickly pick it up and then Aaron can add on it.
Okay.
So of course, the disintermediation of the financial sector is one of the main concerns. and the central banks, the ECB, sees it as a risk for financial stability. It is just the thing that the private corporate financial sector at the moment is in a tricky situation because they are being disrupted on the one hand from the crypto space, especially decentralized financial applications that threats to potentially replace their intermediate position at the moment. And also, if we would have a central bank digital currency being directly issued by the central bank to the economy, also corporate banks would lose their traditional conventional role in the financial system, even though the ECB also just yesterday again confirmed publicly that this is not their intention. They do not intend to disintermediate the financial sector because they see it as a threat to the lending activities and to the economic growth within the Eurozone. And therefore, they plan to avoid such a scenario where large deposits would be deposited with a central bank instead of the commercial bank, because that would be, of course, a bit more risky. And for that reason, they try to employ, or they aim to employ such tools, as I mentioned earlier, with less attractive interest rates on central bank deposits or maximum deposit thresholds. So for example, there could be a rule like maximum 10,000 euros you may deposit in central bank digital currency. The rest of your money, please keep with the corporate bank.
Okay.
But I just see it a bit critical to think in that direction because I don't see it as the responsibility of a central bank to basically subsidize private banks. I think just as we see it also at the moment where financial institutions are exploring crypto custody and developing new business models, and them finding themselves in a new competitive environment being threatened and their business models being threatened, I think they should innovate and think about new ways of wealth and creation or value creation for their customers, and then they would also be able to survive. I mean, especially those banks might be very liquid and have plenty of resources to deploy if necessary in order to remain competitive.
Okay, Aaron.
Yeah, I agree with many of those points here. I think it's kind of a funny situation, isn't it? I mean, we've got a situation where they want to build out a digital euro, but they're also scared of people actually using it. So yeah, we want to make this, we want people to use it, but don't use it too much because you'll ruin this part over here. So that's quite fascinating from my perspective. And that's why I honestly think we're not going to see any digital euro anytime soon. At best, I think I'll be a very old man by the time that actually happens, just due to the fact there are so many different aspects involved to it. And also things are changing quite often within the crypto space. We see so many different things, and for people who know a little bit about crypto, we see so many different aspects in there, whether it's NFTs coming in, DeFi tokens, et cetera, so many different aspects that even shake up the crypto industry as well, where we're like, oh, okay, this is a new thing now. This is kind of what's hot at the moment. So I think in that sense, there's so many different questions that I think even the ECB can't answer. What chain will it be on? Will they create their own chain, which could create more headaches for them as well on top of that? Will it be transparent in the sense that will we be able to see, let's call it their market cap? Will that then affect inflation and deflation of different currencies, especially the euro, in regards to when they say, okay, we're going to now produce another 100 billion euro worth of this token, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's quite fascinating from a number of different angles. And I don't think, as I said, we're going to see it anytime soon. On the positive side, and I'll try and stay positive on that, I think on the bright side, it will introduce a lot of people to cryptocurrencies and blockchain. And I think that's an exciting aspect that more people get involved in. I think it's an element right now of the reason why we're not hearing too much from the ECB or from other different parties or from banks themselves is because they simply do not know what to say or do not know which way to turn. And as a result of that, they don't want to give it too much sunlight. They also don't want to pretend they're ignoring it completely. And I think that there's a big issue right now to really understand what they should be doing and when they should be doing it. And that's probably the biggest issue surrounding it. Because as I said, once they start that, there's just so many different areas that I think are traps for them for sure. There's this centralization aspect of a decentralized market, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in their shoes, but I do see also market share of a lot of banks will be declining. I think we're only really starting to see the opening part of cryptocurrency trades, and that's really starting to happen every time something like Bitcoin goes up, and it's gone up now from about whatever it was, about 20,000 end of last year to up to 60,000 US dollars. And I think as a result of that, that gets more attention to it as well. So as a result of that, I think it's really going to shake up the entire industry. And I think at the end of the day, probably the market will dictate what happens and when it happens and how fast it will all happen.
But usually we don't let the market forces unfold. As we see, there's always lots of intervention. So I guess.
Yes. Why is that? I
Yeah.
think because some people like to control things, and people like to, as I said, I think people like to have their own hand in how people should perform and how people should act in certain specific markets, monetary markets as well. But as I said, I think there's a lot of key aspects that are focused on in regards to different chains, different cryptocurrencies, of how they react, how they act. Bitcoin is just one of them. As I said before, there are a number of different cryptocurrencies around. They all have their different functions. It's not just one cryptocurrency and all of them are just off Bitcoin. It's a wide variety of them based on ERC20, whatever it may be. So as a result of that, I think they've all, not all, some of them have their purpose, some don't. But in saying that, I think it's important to realize that, as I said before, who wants the regulation? Is it the regulators or is it the market? And that's $1 million or $1 billion question, I should say, $1 trillion.
Absolutely.
Can I have a word, Deria?
Just 1 second, Felix, and then Erkan.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. I think a regulation is sometimes very necessary to avoid market failure. And what we have to keep in mind is that the central bank is not going to introduce its own version of a Bitcoin, because it can't do that. Bitcoin is decentralized, organized, or cryptocurrencies are decentralized in their nature. It is the question, how can the central bank introduce its own digital currency by meeting the needs for people to have quicker transfers and or more flexibility in how to use financial payments, how to be in a financial market. And I only said it will take a long time. I can see that the institutions are slow, but I'm rather optimistic that it's going to be sooner than later, because the hype about Bitcoin is also like challenging the old traditional institutions to provide its own answer, because people are more interested in different and new ways, and also having more flexibility in their payments by, instead of using the old currencies. So I think the European Union is well advised to be slow, to be fast and not slow developing its own. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, how is our answer going to look like? Is it more the Chinese approach, which I think would be very difficult because of the supervision that comes with it? Or are we able to find a European approach that is helpful to organize the European market in a better way?
Absolutely. And also geopolitically, the Eurozone might have to get on par with the Chinese and so on and so forth, because otherwise we will be kind of left behind. So there's maybe another point for the European Central Bank really to push for the digital currency approach. Okay, Erkan, you also wanted to add to that point.
Yes, I agree with Felix. We need some kind of regulation after the mass adoption, because you can have a very nice football game without a referee with your friends, but if the game is taking place in a stadium with some 50,000 or 100,000 supporters, then you would need some kind of security, some kind of police and referees. And sometimes retail investors demand this regulation. For example, in Turkey, recently we started to have official statements from the economy ministry, because the investors demanded some, precautions, some action from the government, because the cryptocurrency exchanges started to crash all the time because of the huge interest for them. So the government is now talking about bringing some standards for these exchanges. Of course, they are centralized exchanges, but also today we got a police operation for a kind of Ponzi scheme, which was acting like they were pretending like they were a cryptocurrency exchange. And those things are happening, and people want sometimes the government to come in and do something. But we shouldn't, of course, we mustn't over-regulate independent cryptocurrencies, because this is the only option to fight against domination of China, Chinese blockchain and digital currency systems, because China is on the production side so powerful, and it wants to convert this power into monetary power, and it will use its digital currency for this. So only option to fight against this operation is to provide your citizens the free options for every option on monetary side.
And China is already very, very advanced. So we see them already basically finishing or finalizing the test phase and introducing it. And as Felix said, they're already using their digital currency to finance their infrastructure, which is mind-blowing when you think about it. Yeah,
of course, you should keep the privacy. You should keep the traditional cash. You should implement the digital euro or digital lira, because that will have benefits in terms of rapid and efficient monetary policy with programmable money. And you should also keep independent cryptocurrencies for your citizens, mostly because they are very powerful saving tools for reserve assets for your companies and your citizens.
Against the inflation. So Aaron also wanted to jump in.
I want to thank you, all of you, for all the speakers and the participants. I have to leave for another meeting, as I told you before.
Yes, you said you have to leave by 6. Thank you very much, Erkan. It's been super interesting, and thank you for bringing your perspective here into the discussion.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity, and everybody take care.
See you, Erkan.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
So, Aaron, you wanted to...
I was just going to challenge what he said, but he's now gone. So what am I going to do? Look, I just think in reference to the football game that we spoke about, I'm talking about the game in itself. I'm talking about the fact that we all are bound by specific rules that we all know that are either subconscious, whatever you want to call it. That's what I was referring to, not in regards to police and crowds. Maybe that's a different narrative for another day. But as I said, what I'm mainly focused on is that we all understand the rules in specific areas. And that also goes, I know there's a chat that just popped up in regards to whether I'm against taxes. I am not against taxes. I happily pay taxes. I would also happily pay more taxes, believe it or not, because the issue is that we need to help people, and we need to help people in society. And that's what our taxes should be used for, 100%. So no, I'm all for taxes. I'm for deregulating or no regulation or lack of regulation in the cryptocurrency situation is something that we can all thrive upon, because I feel it will slow us down significantly. But in regards to specifically taxes, absolutely, they just should be directed in places where they're needed most, which is a bigger issue in this world. So yes.
Absolutely. Please, if anyone from the audience, we came to the end of our discussion. If anyone has a question, I'm more than happy to bring it in. So do write in the chat. We're happy to answer the questions.
There was one about the energy intensiveness of Bitcoin mining, which is a pretty common...
we didn't touch upon that. Let's take that. Can you read that, Max? And
sure. So Siwon Kim asked, oh no, sorry. I'm not looking at the correct. So Friedrich said, Bitcoin mining is a very energy intensive business. How are we going to deal with this? Yeah, and this is, for me personally, honestly, this is the only sticking point where I feel kind of I have conflicting feelings about Bitcoin. In pretty much every other category, I'm very pro Bitcoin. I'm very bullish. I'm very excited. But this is a real issue. But it might not be as bad as you get the idea of when you read like, oh, you know, Bitcoin mining uses as much energy as this country or something. Yes, it uses a lot of energy, but it's almost like a market for energy in itself, because Bitcoin mining is always going to be kind of just barely profitable, because the more miners that come onto the network, the difficulty of mining goes up to try and keep the block time at 10 minutes. so for you to start a mining operation, you have to have access to very, very cheap electricity is what I'm saying. And something like 70% of those mining operations are doing it with sustainable energy that can't be harnessed, or just energy in general that, you know, so for example, there's mining operations starting in Texas using kind of the flaring, like the extra gas that they're taking out of the ground that they can't use, or you know, there's kind of mining operations like when there's wind blowing and wind turbines are generating a lot of electricity, but they can't actually transfer all that electricity through the grid, or there's not a demand for all that electricity. Like, you know, electricity prices go negative in certain parts of the world with lots of solar and wind during certain parts of the day. So we're almost seeing people like arbitraging the energy markets with Bitcoin mining. So yes, it's you know, just cranking out hashing functions is I mean, it's inefficient, but it's proof of work. Like, this is how we prove that a transaction is trustworthy, because someone's put in work, energy, and you know, electricity to verify it. So I mean, there's proof of stake coins out there, like Aaron's been saying. You know, this isn't all about Bitcoin. Ethereum is going to transfer from proof of work to proof of stake sometime soon. Proof of stake is slightly less decentralized, slightly less, not slightly less secure, but yeah, slightly less decentralized, and much less energy intensive. So there are solutions out there, but Bitcoin is kind of like the, you know, proof of work is just kind of the, like the AK-47 of blockchains. Like it just works, you know, and that's the situation right now.
Anyone else who wanted to jump in and say something to the environmental concerns of blockchain?
Yeah, if you want to mine Bitcoin, look at POP, proof participation mining models. They're also very good, and they're very low power, extremely low power. But I'll leave that up to people to Google later, perhaps.
I also heard that it could actually support the green energy uptake, especially when it comes to hydrogen. I just heard that today, that blockchain can actually support that.
Yeah, I mean, if I can just chime in again, like my degree is in electrical and mechanical engineering, so I've spent a bit of time thinking about energy markets and grids and stuff, and it's not always as straightforward as like, oh, we're producing energy here and we're just going to use that in the city over here. Like, it gets very complicated. Energy markets are extremely complex. So Bitcoin mining like makes sense sometimes and doesn't make sense other times, and it's up to the miners to determine, you know, when they're going to run their rigs or not. It's not like we're just burning coal and just, you know, putting megawatts and megawatts into Bitcoin mining. You know, you do have to be kind of strategic and tactical on a global scale with where you're mining and how you're getting that energy. So there's a lot of aspects to it, but the most recent report that I read was something like 70% of Bitcoin mining is from sustainable sources. So yeah.
Interesting. We have a question in the chat. I can't see who is it from right now. It's from Simon Kim. What additional utility would a Euro CBDC actually bring? Comparing it to China is a flawed comparison, in my opinion, as the Chinese government has the power to convert Chinese businesses and tech giants to adopt digital yuan at a rapid pace. The EU does not have that much control. Will the Euro CBDC be compatible with the DeFi, perhaps enticing users to earn higher API with it?
Yeah, that's probably one for me.
That's the case. Who's going to build the blockchain bridge for it?
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the end,
really good question, by the way, really good question.
Yeah. So in the end, I think it really depends on how exactly a digital euro would be designed, if it even was designed. So there's a lot of uncertainties and variables that we can't really, you know, rely on at the moment. But of course, if it was a successful currency, I would definitely count on it being an integral part of the digital economy, similar to stablecoins at the moment. So I think for a digital euro to actually be successful, it would have to pick up as many logics from the crypto space as possible. from the crypto and digital asset space, instead of having a siloed approach, because that would make it less successful. So if you look at the cryptocurrency space, everything is open source and a lot of interoperability is given between the different networks. And that allows for a lot of synergy effects to happen. So there's a vast amount of innovation because everybody can access a network and build on top of it, look into the code, identify shortcomings of it, and create something better based on that. And I think building a siloed conventional network, which is isolated from the other digital assets sphere, would be a problem and would make the digital euro not very sustainably competitive in the long run. So I would see the digital euro just integrated deeply into the digital economy and digital finance, making it integratable into all sorts of financial products, enabling people to pay transactions with it, make payments with it, to collateralize it or to lend it out. And that would then just also attract a lot of developers to build on top of it and integrate it into their networks in the end. And when it comes to the potential utility of such a central bank digital currency, I would go back to the points I mentioned earlier. When it comes to all these potential functions that could be used to solve all sorts of fiscal and monetary government affairs more effectively and more efficiently in terms of data-based decision-making. So decision made on data analysis, of course.
Okay, Felix.
I would like to add to that for the question, what is the difference to the Chinese approach? And there are two words, it's transparency and democracy, because the goals and the activities from the European Central Banks, they are publicly available. Also the approaches and the ideas to follow them. And they are supervised by the European Parliament, that is also representing all members of the European Union in different countries. And the Chinese government does not have to justify its activities in front of the population in that way as the European Central Bank has to. And this also slows down the process. And like C1, like I said, the Chinese government has the power to transfer Chinese companies into huge giants in a short term, and the European Union can't do that. The European Union has the free market approach that would help to have more acceptance for that, and also to distribute the currency, the market activities in a way where it is best, as a free market can distribute it in the best way.
Aaron, I see you smiling. Can you?
Just happy to be here. No, look, a free market, let's use that term extremely liberally. I mean, let's not turn from who built the banks. Who built the banks? And that's your tax-paying dollars. And they're also the tax-paying dollars are all euros, in the sense that also go to those banks and go to the stock markets when there's a crash or when there's something that needs to be done. All these cryptocurrencies, all these blockchain companies, they're not supported by that. They're not given extra money, they're not given boosts by any means. It is not a free market in Europe by any means. These banks are in the pockets of the governments are in the pockets of the banks. That's how life works. I'm sorry to be kind of dropping that right now, but we all know this, it's fact. And your tax-paying money goes to the banks in order to prop them up and keep them in the positions that they are right now. The fact we have a free market, the fact that we all have to use banks, the fact that we have to give a bank account in order to, when we get employed by a company, I mean, that's not a free market, because we're demanding people use a facility, a private facility, in order to get paid. Now, that's also unacceptable, but we call that a free market. And it's not a free market. I'm sorry, it's really not. So as I said, in that sense, I don't necessarily agree with the free market, or maybe the Western ideal that we are a free market and we allow markets to operate how they wish. And, we just sit back and let them, go up and down as they wish. It's not true. When they go up, and I've heard this quote, I don't want to claim it for myself, but it's often the case, when markets go up, it's capitalism. But when they go down, it's socialism, because we need to bail them out. So isn't it, I said, we use these free markets and capitalism and, everything's fine. And well, the markets are going up, everyone else has to, go with it. But when they suffer, like we're seeing right now with coronavirus and Lufthansa's and the TUIs in Germany, et cetera, we need to start bailing them out. And as I said, so free market, I would use that very liberally in the Western world. But as I said, I know we kind of like to think that that's the case, but as I said, I beg to differ.
But it's still free, more free, or much freer than.
Well, free for some, absolutely. I agree with you. For those on top, they're absolutely free. And I'd love to be in that position one day. But I think, as I said, there's more free than some. Sure, you could argue that. Maybe we should say that it's more free than some market, as opposed to free market. Maybe that's the better narrative to say. But maybe that's a narrative coming from the blockchain/crypto side from me, as opposed to the other narrative coming from the banking/government side, where they talk about the negatives of using cryptocurrencies. And so I just think we need a societal change or a societal view on how we view what's happening in the world, and what's happening with your taxpayer dollars, and where they should be going, and who are they propping up at the end of the day. But that's potentially for another day. Otherwise we'll be here till midnight, I think. So
okay, we already have 6:20. If there's nothing very urgent, I'm gonna wrap up. I saw you, Max, raising your hand. Did you wanted to make a last point?
I guess I'll just try and keep it super brief. I mean, as someone who thinks a lot about businesses and entrepreneurship and markets as well, the banks have served us pretty well for hundreds of years, facilitating transactions, doing custody for our wealth, but really fundamentally their business model is kind of coming to the end. So they no longer kind of serve the function of custodying, our money, keeping it safe, because it's all kind of on accounts anyway. They don't really collect money from interest rates anymore with super low interest rates. Sure, they can still underwrite loans and create credit, and that's an essential, that'll stay an essential part of their business model. But really facilitating transactions, I mean, that's the big one that's going out the window now, because we have settlement layers like blockchain. I can send money to Aaron right now. He can send money back to me. We don't need bank accounts. We just need phones or computers. So the banks, I mean, their time has come, just from like a business point of view. There's no reason for them to play such a large role in finance that they still do now. So one way or the other, the banks are going to have to maybe shrink in size and change. But that's just my thoughts in a nutshell.
Fascinating. And on that note, I want to thank you, dear speakers, for this mind-blowing discussion. It was really great. And I'd like to do that again very soon. It's an endless topic, and it's something which will be with us for the next decades to come. So thank you very much. And I'll see you all soon. And great discussion. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Daria, for all your work
Thank
setting it
you
up as well.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a
Bye-bye.
lot for organizing. Thanks.
Thank you.